Good afternoon and good evening to all of you abroad, and welcome to Peace Island Institute's Honoring Black Leadership lecture. Today, I hope that all of you are doing well and that you are staying safe and healthy. My name is Esther, and I will be the program moderator for today. And just to give you a brief description about myself, I am a mental health counselor and been in the healthcare industry for over 10 years. I am delighted to be a part of this program, and now that I am ready and see the best of this show. Now, on behalf of Peace Island Institutes, we would like to express our gratitude to Dr. Bulent Kenes and Dr. Omar Bah, who has joined us today to discussing their books. Um, we are thankful to give you both for you to give us this time. We will also like to thank the many organizations who made this event possible. Thank you to the Peace Islands Institute of Boston, Refugee Dream Center, and Peace Valley Foundation and the Maple Foundation. After the lecture, we will have Q&A questions with Dr. Bulent and as well as Dr. Omar. Please feel free to send any questions on the chat box. And right now, I'd like to introduce the greatest, our two wonderful guests tonight. Now, before I do that, I like to say, I like to breathe a little bit introduction on the Peace Islands Institute of Boston, a nonprofit organization devoted to promoting interfaith and interculture dialogue. We welcome every society with particular program to connect people in the real world. Our goal is to build loyal relationship to collaborate on service project that benefits society and to promote universal principles, all in order to contribute the greater understanding and peace. We passionately believe in the power of dialogue to change attitude, which is why today that we are here. Now, to introduce Dr. Bulent, I like to say Dr. Bulent Keneş, a PhD in an excellent is an excellent journalist, Turkish journalist, who has been the author of 6 books on Turkish politics, Iran, and as well as Iran Islam. A veteran journalist for over 25 years, Dr. Keneş is the founding editor in chief of the prestigious today's Zaman and English daily published in Turkey until 2016 when it was shut down by the Erdogan regime. He is also among the founders of the Stockholm Center for Freedom, which refers as SCF. He is now the executive director of European Center for Populism Studies, which also refers ECPS in Brussels. Without further ado, we'd like to welcome Dr. Bulent Kenes. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you very much, and thanks Peace Islands Institute and other organizations to inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my views and findings that I detailed in my recently released book about what have been happening in Turkey for last few years through targeting and persecuting the members and alleged members of the Gulen Movement. But before starting my presentation, Could you please share my PowerPoint, Halit? Oh, yes. But before starting my presentation, I would like to talk about a short glossary to make the concepts clearer. When I say nationalist or ultra-nationalist during my presentation, I mean those who are conventional ethnic race-based nationalists. However, neo-nationalists form different ideological group, and they are a mix of hardcore Kemalists, staunch laicists, and sovereignists. Moreover, Islamofascism means a fascism based on exploitation of both religious and nationalistic emotions to maintain an authoritarian or semi-totalitarian despotic regime. The Eurogenism as a term is also an ideology which originated from the far-left movement in Turkey, as possesses an anti-Western approach in foreign policy and ultra-nationalist sentiment in domestic politics. The Eurasianist think that Turkey should leave NATO and end its bid for European Union membership. They contend that Turkey's interests lie outside the Western world and that Turkey should join the Russia or China-led camp. Dear friends, we know the fact that the cruelty of man to his fellow man is not new. It is as old as the history of mankind. Mass killings, ethnic cleansings, massacres, and genocides continue to cause irrecoverable injuries to the collective conscience. Although there were some intellectual efforts to prevent massacres and genocide after First World War, we know that it was only in the 1990s that the international law against the crime of genocide produced some legal results and penalties. However, what is more important than the prosecution and punishment of the crime of genocide is its prevention by early recognition of the genocidal process. Experts working on genocide emphasize that some conceivable mechanism could be established on the subject. As one of the prominent experts, Gregory Stanton, describes the process that leads to genocide as predictable, and since it is predictable, it is also preventable. In my book, I have integrated the 10 stages of genocide, which was formulated by Stanton with political scientist Hasan Kakar's studies. And then I applied this to widespread and systematic prosecutions aimed at members or alleged members of the Gulen Movement in Turkey. The clear picture that emerged as a result of this work or this research reveals that all the crimes and acts contained in the academic descriptions and legal definition of the crime of genocide have already been carried out in different scales against the members of the Gulen Movement by the Erdogan regime. As of today, millions of people have been victimized by the campaign of persecution conducted against the Gulen Movement, which the Erdogan regime accelerated after the controversial military coup attempt of July 15, 2016. More than 160,000 people have been dismissed from their civil service jobs and deprived of their and their families' subsistence. Tens of thousands of people in the private sector have suffered a similar fate. Prevented from starting any kind of business or working elsewhere, they were sentenced to poverty and transformed into the civil death. Just because of their daily activities, which are non-criminal acts according to the law and a part of the very natural routine of life, more than 500,000 people of all ages and sex have been taken into custody, and many more have been subjected to investigation. Moreover, at least 78,000 people have been imprisoned. Widespread and systematic torture, unfortunately, has reemerged in Turkey. Thousands of people were severely tortured either in police custody or in prison. At least 200 people were people died under suspicious circumstances or committed suicide because of psychological and physical pressure, torture, and traumas that they experienced. At least 32 sympathizers of the Gulen Movement were kidnapped in broad daylight through mafia-like tactics, and the whereabouts of some of them are still unknown. During this process, at least 200 media outlets have also been closed. Over 173 journalists and media workers are still in Turkish jails. Thousands of journalists have been left unemployed, and hundreds of them, like me, have been forced into exile. On the other hand, thousands of educational establishments, including 15 private universities, were closed and their assets were confiscated. Some of these assets were transferred to Erdogan's cronies. In the process, more than 23,000 academics have been directly affected, with the remaining universities transformed into mentally and spiritually hollow shells. Also, the assets of over 1,000 major companies were usurped. All these, the assets of about 5,000 institutions and foundations, as well as thousands of individual persons, were confiscated. You can find more detailed statistics in my book. The increasingly widespread witch hunt, systematic and widespread hate speech, ongoing persecution, and massacre of Gulen Movement members have made conditions in Turkey ripe for a deliberate, planned, and systematic genocide. The Erdogan regime, along with millions of volunteers, has made significant progress in the direction of uprooting the Gulen Movement and has made its actual implementation only a matter of time. Now, all indicators in Turkey show that the risk of a systematic genocide increases with every passing day, and that this risk has become a clear and present danger. Therefore, this alarming situation requires the urgent mobilization of international community, all institutions and powers that bear responsibility for the prevention of such a process before graver consequences are realized. In this regard, my book may be kindly accepted as a timely or early warning. Dear friends, as is known, despite some serious limitations, the most comprehensive and functional definition and description of genocide is found in Article 2 of the United Nations Genocide Convention. According to this convention, the realization of just one of the 5 acts clearly described in the article is legally sufficient for the act to be defined as a crime of genocide. Genocide, described as systematic acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, is in the process of full implementation in Turkey against the Gulen Movement that constitutes a sui generis religious social group with its distinguishing characteristics. As late Afghan-American academic Hasan Kakar argued that there are some preconditions for the possibility of implementation of genocide in a country or in a region, as one can assume that a leader, a government, or a group would like to annihilate a group which was otherized, demonized, hostilized by themselves. However, if they have not the required preconditions, they couldn't realize their intentions for extermination. In the book, it was discussed in detail to what extent the historical, sociological, cultural, political, institutional, and conjunctural conditions in Turkey meet these preconditions as defined by Hasan Kakar. In this context, the Armenian genocide and Syriac genocide in 1915, Dersim genocide in 1938, poll tax in 1942, Istanbul pogrom in 1955, Maraş and Çorum massacres in 1970s, Sivas massacre in 1992, and ongoing atrocities against Kurdish people prove that there is a strong national culture in Turkey that doesn't value human life. Along with his own dangerous radical Islamist ideology, since 2014, Erdogan has allied with the ultra-nationalist and Eurogenist neo-nationalist ideologies. Thus, he has established a sui generis Islamofascist regime based on these three pillars and succeeded in creating an agitated society nourished by racial, sociological, and religious superiority discourse and ideology. The extremist statements of these three lines of thought do find a place for themselves in Erdogan's rhetoric, which sees people of a different race, civilization, religious understanding, and even different ideologies and lifestyles as enemies who are inferior and need to be destroyed. Radical Islamism, ultranationalism, and Eurogenist neo-nationalism, which constitute the poisonous pillars of Erdogan's Islamofascist regime that constantly glorify death and killing, are known for radicalizing their socio-cultural hinterland with a sharper discourse. As a combination of these three ideologies, the current Islamofascist regime in Turkey sees members of the Gulen Movement as one of their main targets needing to be destroyed. The fact that the more powerful majority group, viewing potential victims of genocide as less than human or inhuman, is interpreted as a significant sign of a process leading to a possible genocide. This is also the area in which Erdogan's Islamofascist regime is most effective. As was detailed in the book, the Erdogan regime has not hesitated to use hate speech targeting the Gulen Movement members to depict them as inhuman thousands of times. According to our finding, as of May 2017, the number of expressions comprising obvious hate speech against the Gulen Movement voiced by Erdogan alone exceeds 240. 240 unique hate expressions he used. Thanks to Erdogan and his regime's systematic and widespread dehumanizing hate speech, members of the Gulen Movement have become objects of hatred and, in the end, not perceived as human beings by the society. Even the extreme discourse such as malignant tumors, we will sterilize them, blood-sucking leeches, cancer cells, sneaky viruses, leeches, dirty water mixed with milk, vampires, and such that Erdogan and his media use repeatedly about Gulen Movement members are real alarm bells that require the international community to be vigilant against a coming genocide. On the other hand, just as during the rule of the Union and Progress Party in the Ottoman era, under which the Armenian genocide took place, and Hitler's Germany, where the Holocaust was perpetrated, Erdogan has succeeded in becoming uncontrollable by concentrating all power in his hand and has fulfilled another requirement for the genocide infrastructure by establishing a centralized bureaucratic autocracy in Turkey. Erdogan, who has rendered the system of checks and balances totally non-functional, has abolished the constitutional democracy and exercised arbitrary authority not delegated by law. Using this power without any limitations, he succeeded in converting the state apparatus into an illegal maverick, the judiciary into a sledgehammer to crush his opponents, and the police force in total, and military forces to a great extent into his partisan militia. Among the conditions of the process leading to genocide mentioned by Hasan Kakar, Erdogan has also created armed militia elements consisting of malicious domestic and foreign individuals and criminals. Erdogan, who has developed an ominous relationship with jihadist and radical Islamist terror groups in the Middle East. He has integrated extension of radical Islamist terror organizations such as Hezbollah. This is Turkish Hezbollah, not Lebanon or Iranian Hezbollah. İBDACE as a radical Islamist terror organization, and Al-Qaeda and ISIL into his regime. Additionally, by creating or collaborating with mafia structures, as in the case of Sedat Peker and Alaaddin Çakıcı, by creating militia forces, as happened with Sadat and the Ottoman Hearts, and by arming his party members, Erdogan has fulfilled another prerequisite of a possible genocide, as defined by Hasan Kakar. Dear friends, the act listed in paragraph 5 of Article 2 of the UN Genocide Convention are aimed at harming the group targeted for genocide physically and or psychologically. When studied carefully, it can be seen that Erdogan regime's preparation for annihilating the Gulen Movement seem to fit very well with the definition of genocide in Article 2 of the Convention. First, the killing of members of the group in the genocide definition coincides with the 9th stage of Gregory Stanton's stage of extermination in the genocide process. All stages before this stage are only preparations for the extermination stage in terms of the process of the genocide. It is obvious that 8 out of these 10 stages have been carried out in the process of genocide directed against the Gulen Movement. While the acts corresponding to each stage of the Gulen Movement's annihilation continue, according to the findings of this research, it is just a matter of time to systematize the 9th stage, which has already begun with more than 200 suspicious deaths in police detention or in prison. The timing of the implementation of a full-fledged genocide for which the practical and socio-psychological infrastructure has already been prepared is left to the convenience of the Erdogan regime, which has repeatedly declared its intentions on this issue. Moreover, the predominant part of the persecution carried out by the Erdogan regime against the members of the Gulen Movement corresponds to the act of causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group in Article 2 of the Convention. Members of the Gulen Movement have been subjected to all the acts that are considered criminal acts under this article, including torture, rape, death threats, and sexual assaults solely because of their affiliation with the targeted group. As can easily be seen, the acts in this category that fall within the scope of the genocide offense are generally qualified as torture and ill treatment. One of the important elements of Raphael Lemkin's definition of genocide is also the destruction of individual security, freedom, health, honor, and even life of the members of the group that is targeted for genocide. In this respect, the Erdogan regime's threats of torture, maltreatment, sexual assault, rape, wounding, and killing, which target tens of thousands of people who have been taken into custody and deprived of their freedom by arrest, fall under the scope of the crime of genocide. Because the members of the Gulen Movement have been labeled, stigmatized, and subject to treatments such as detention, arrest, seizure of property, torture, ill treatment, and many other similar persecutions, not because they are individually guilty of any crime, but due to their ties to the movement, the Gulen Movement. It can be seen that members of the Gulen Movement have been completely exposed to deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, as it take place in UN Genocide Convention. Moreover, all actions cited in Lemkin's definition of genocide, such as, in quote, a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. The objectives of such a plan would be disintegration of the political and social institutions, of culture, language, national feelings, religion, and the economic existence of national groups, and the destruction of the personal security, liberty, health, dignity, and even the lives of the individuals belong to such groups, end quote, have targeted members of the Gulen Movement in Turkish case. As has been stated in the book, deliberate and systematic crimes committed by the Erdogan dictatorship, such as mass detention and arrest, the confiscation of the properties of the thousands of companies and individuals, media organizations, and institutions, mass dismissals of people from public service, condemning them to a civil death, correspond to the acts that constitute the offense of genocide according to Lemkin's genocide definition. On the other hand, although the Erdogan dictatorship has not been acting deliberately in planning to systematically prevent births among members of the Gulen Movement, some threats exceed the heinous practice of imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, as it takes place in the UN Convention. For instance, the idea of the murder of infants is sometimes expressed by pro-Erdogan journalists and his political cronies. As a matter of fact, about 17,000 women have been imprisoned solely for their affiliation with the Gulen Movement, and most of them are married. Their husbands' arbitrary and long imprisonments disrupts conditions for new births. However, for the time being, except for the arbitrary long-term imprisonment of one or both spouses, there are no deliberate, planned, or systematic practice of Erdogan dictatorship against couples affiliated with the Gulen Movement in the form of biological genocide, such as the segregation of men and women, sterilization, or forced birth control. In addition, one of the acts that are treated as genocide in the convention, even in the case of being executed in isolation, is forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Children who are transferred to another group are torn from their social ties and alienated from their identity. Although the Islamofascist Erdogan regime has not systematically practiced this type of activity, many children have been left behind due to the arbitrary arrest of both of their parents. Furthermore, one of the most frequent threats to Gulen Movement members by pro-Erdogan groups is taking children from their parents and giving them to orphanages controlled by the regime. Actually, according to some unconfirmed claims, there are already over 500 children who have Gulen Movement affiliated parents in orphanages. On the other hand, this crime of genocide is carried out in a different form by interfering with the children's upbringing, education, and socialization environments, aiming to produce a result similar to ripping children from their social ties and alienating them from their identity, traditions, and moral values of the group. The Erdogan regime closed more than 1,060 private schools and 848 private student dormitories, cancelled the professional license of more than 22,000 teachers who used to work movement-affiliated private schools, thus rendering them unable to teach in a deliberate and planned manner. Also, more than 140,000 students have been torn from their schools where they used to be educated according to a set of universal humanitarian values, and they have been forced to continue to study where the political Islamist indoctrination of the Erdogan regime prevails. Therefore, it can be asserted that even this part of the genocide crime has also been committed at a certain level. Dear friends, the book's findings reveal that the process of genocide conducted by the Erdogan regime targeting Gulen Movement has completed the stage of classification, symbolization, discrimination, dehumanization, organization, polarization, preparation, persecution, as detailed by Gregory Stanton. It has also been observed that the stage of extermination, as a ninth stage, has already begun on an individual level. The stage of denial has also started, as in the case of people who were killed under torture because of their Gulen Movement affiliation. All 5 conditions that Hasan Kakar stated a country should have in the process of a possible genocide are present in today's Turkey. Moreover, at least 2 of the 5 acts described in Article 2 of the United Nations Genocide Convention as the crime of genocide have been realized completely and 3 of them have been realized to various extents. If we elaborate on the Erdogan regime's systematic, widespread, and deliberate persecution of members of the Gulen Movement, we can easily assert that it constitutes the crime of killing members of the group, as is mentioned in Article 2 of the Convention, partially. The crime of causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, completely. The crime of deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, completely. The crime of imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, partially. And the crime of forcibly transferring children of the group to another group, partially. It is important to remember again that Article 2 of the Convention begins with the words, "In the present Convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group." And the fact that just one of these acts is legally sufficient to define the crime as genocide. Although the act of extermination or annihilation of the Gulen Movement or their uprooting, in the words of Erdogan, meet the academic and legal definition and description of genocide in many ways, the most destructive dimension of genocide is the physical extermination, and it has not yet been implemented systematically. However, as mentioned earlier, the realization of the extermination is just a matter of time. Academics Elihu Richter, Yael Stein, Alex Bernier, and Mark Sherman pointed out in one of their articles that, in quote, "the lessons of the Holocaust empower us to address prevention of hate language and incitement when they are used against all populations without waiting for the consequences." End quote. Therefore, genocide experts like Stanton have underlined that genocide should be preventable if they are predictable. And also, he mentions the impossibility of preventing genocide after the start of killing, rape, deportations, and looting. These scholars conclude from the evidence of several 20th century genocides that hate speech and incitement together increase risk for genocide, especially when they come from the top down in an authoritarian regimes with their environments of coercions, direction, and instruction. While acknowledging that not all incitement leads to genocide and that genocide may occur without evidence of incitement, these scholars advise that when political leaders use explicit pseudo-medical and epidemiological metaphors such as microbes, field, cancer, typhoid, and rats to dehumanize victim groups, it is prudent to regard such language as an urgent warning sign of imminent genocide. In the case of Erdogan regime and the Gulen movement, unfortunately this stage has long passed. Erdogan, by targeting the Gulen movement, has for quite some time been using hundreds of hate expressions, including viruses, cancers, tumors, vampires, leeches, bloodsuckers, bacteria, and microbes. However, since the systematic and widespread physical extermination process through killings has not begun, it is not yet too late. Dear friends, as a conclusion, a possible genocide openly targeting members of the Gulen movement is not only predictable, but that can also easily be seen with its concrete signs and thus should be preventable. To prevent this genocide with the stage of executions just inches away, it is vital that all international humanitarian institutions and political organizations act without delay, develop measures, and implement them immediately to prevent possible full-fledged genocide. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me and your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Bulent, for your presentation. It was awesome. I can't say anything more. However, I have a couple questions for you. One of the things that always bothering me is that, and I heard you talk about it, are the children and women that's been taken away and put them in prison. I have seen it. Not to say that it has happened recently, but I've seen it in a repetitive ways. So, and now that you talk about it, how would you attend to help these people?
Yeah, unfortunately, there is not so much instruments to help them other than just raising voice and making them as an international agenda. Otherwise, there is no legal channels in Turkey to struggle for them because there is no rule of law in Turkey. All the prosecutors and the judges is just listen to what Erdogan says and what he expects as the judge in the Hitler's time in Germany, they said that we give all these decisions about the cases by taking Hitler as a model, and we take a try to think that if we instead of us, Hitler sit in this table, what kind of decision he gave. So in Turkey, the decisions in the courts is taken in this way also. So other than raising awareness about what is happening in Turkey globally, I think there is no other method right now.
Well, thank you for answering that. What another question that I have, um, and I heard also that you say something about 22,000 teachers and educators has been off of their jobs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct, but it is not the full picture about the teachers. This is just the teachers who are employed in Gulen affiliated schools.
Mhm.
This is private schools. The numbers of these teachers is 22,000.
Got it.
Just before the coup attempt in 15th of July in 2016, Erdogan regime started to make void the license of these teachers. But after the coup, it totally cancelled all legitimation or all license of these teachers. But the teachers who are victims of Erdogan regime is not just consist of these 2,000 teachers in private schools. Also in public schools, thousands of other teachers dismissed, and thousands of them still in prisons, including my own brother. He's a physics teacher. He was a very successful teacher and very experienced teacher, but since he also has a sympathetic feelings to Gulen Movement, he put in the prison and stayed in the prison for over 4 years.
Mhm.
And he is not in a yeah, he's just a teacher, and the thousands of teachers who used to work in public schools also in the process of this victimization, and the 22,000 teachers I mentioned is just teachers who used to work Gulen affiliated private schools. If we add other teachers, the numbers could raise maybe 40,000 or 50,000 teachers. Esther,
Everyone to write their questions on the Q&A. Dr. Bulent is available to answer any questions that you may have at this time. And again, Dr. Bulent, thank you. I am very grateful that you have given us a very clear ways to understand what's going on in the country, or for that matter, in many countries. It may not happen to be so clear, but yet again, I think we all have something that we can take on that. Um, Now, I just wanted to say one more thing that I want to ask you. And what is the plan in general for the plan in general for the foundation, for the Bulent Foundation, that can help people to not to be on this situation that they are in?
I think international organizations have a responsibility to act proactively to prevent such a tragedy. We know that in Bosnia Herzegovina,
Mhm.
the whole global community just watched and just waited and see the realization of the massacres in Bosnia and Srebrenica. In Rwanda, we also realized the same mistake. And South Sudan, especially in Darfur, and both the South Sudan and the Darfur, we also experienced the ignorance of the international community. But this time in Turkey, everything is before happens in the before the people. So international organizations, starting with United Nations, has a responsibility in the framework of the responsibility to protect, R2P concept. Uh, there is massive human rights violations, massive torture cases, and massive arrests and uh, collective indictments against the people. These people are not criminals, they didn't commit any crime. These people just persecuted just because of their affiliation with a movement. And this movement was stigmatized and labeled as terrorist organization, even if these people has never had any tendency to use weapon or violence. Even the Erdogan regime suppressed so much that people couldn't bear, to overcome. Just one of these people not tend to apply a violence against police or soldiers or state public officials. So what kind of terrorists these are? We are talking about millions of people, and we are talking about more than 500,000 of people who were taken under custody, and none of them resist police or any legal authorities, even if their rights violated so harshly. So I think European Union, European countries who are sensitive to human rights and who are respectful to the dignity of the humankind has a responsibility to act to prevent Erdogan continue to persecute innocent people. Not only the Gulen Movement, it is also a reality for some Alevites and some Kurdish segments of society. They are also under pressure and oppression and persecution. So Erdogan regime couldn't be accepted as a honorable, respectable interlocutor in international relations or bilateral relations. This must be a relative for multilateral relations and also bilateral relations. But unfortunately, we see that there is a kind of hypocrisy. There is a double standard when the case of human rights in countries like Turkey come to the agenda. They don't care about it. They just continue transactional relations, and they just going on take and buy relations, give and take relations. It is not acceptable, I think.
Well, thank you once again for answering the questions. I have one last question for you, and you don't have to answer it, but I just wanted to ask. You are right now in exile by the Erdogan regime.
Mhm.
Would you ever return back home if he happens to leave?
I have no plan right now to return back to Turkey. Maybe in the future, maybe long, long later. if Turkey turn to the rule of law, supremacy of law, and democracy again, why not? I can return back to Turkey. But I think it will take a long time because it is not easy to make things correct again in Turkey. It is not easy.
Well, once again, I just want to say thank you, and you have given us a lot to study, and you're giving us a lot to understand things that's going on around. I am very grateful that you were able to sit with us and giving me the opportunity to speak to you. However, right now, I'm going to proceed with our next guest. Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much,
much.
Dr. Bulent. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Omar. Dr. Omar Bah is a founder and executive director of the Refugee Dream Center. He is a 501c3 post-resettlement refugee agency based in Providence, Rhode Island. He is a tortured survivor, former journalist, and refugee from Gambia. Dr. Bah is also an author and of the book Africa's Hell on Earth, The Ordeal of an African Journalist, and the recipient of Rhode Island of the Year 2015. Award of the 2021 Christiana Carteaux Bannister Award from Rhode Island Monthly Magazine. He has completed trauma treatment certificate at the Harvard program in refugee trauma, refers at HPRT, and a teacher of psychology both in William James College and at the HPRT. Dr. Bah, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for giving me this opportunity, this moment that I can speak to you. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Esther. Let me just share my my PowerPoint here. Just 1 minute. Oh, great. Thank you, Esther, and thanks, Dr. Gulen, for the beautiful presentation. I think, oh, great. There was a lot of noise coming from the background. Yeah, I think your presentation actually is so important that it gives a global overview of my own story, my own life, the situation in the Gambia and many other countries. I heard you mention South Sudan and Darfur and other places because Turkey is a big country with a big population. So the things happening could be a reflection of what is happening around the world. I'm from the Gambia, and it is a very small country. Actually, one of the biggest frustrations I used to have during what we used to call the struggle, we fought against the dictatorship to the extent that we created the group that was fighting it. We didn't have something so organized as the Gulen Movement, but we used to call it the struggle. And in the struggle, one of my biggest frustrations was that many people did not know the Gambia. I was in exile in Ghana and Senegal and other places. And I went to Ghana, and most of the people, probably 1 out of 3 people, would not know what Gambia is. And I would say, "Oh, where is that?" Inside Africa. I mean, then you imagine what others around the world would be doing. So that is why I wanted to talk about the evolution of dictatorship in the Gambia, with a focus on the media, because I mean I like the beautiful presentation by the doctor about the media and the Gulen movement, but specifically the media aspect, because I think that also explains what can happen when somebody or a certain entity is trying to do genocide. So in this presentation, I just wanted to specifically focus on what happened to journalists in the Gambia during the period when a lot of dictatorship, efforts were to exterminate the media or journalists in that country in order to silence them, because that is what the dictatorship needed in order to succeed. So a quick background about the Gambia. Is the smallest country on the mainland of the continent of Africa. You can see that is the smallest, that small spot there inside Senegal. Actually, that is why many people don't know of it. So, I mean, size doesn't matter, but in this instance, the size matters, because it is the reason why many people don't know it. Until recently, it is less than 2 million people. Now we are about 2 million individuals. That makes it a very small country, and it's easy for things to happen there that the global setting, that the global village does not know about. And that is why it was so effective from the dictator's perspective to systematically attack specific groups like journalists, activists, and kill people massively, torture, make people disappear. And also there was a lot of mysticism, feeding people to crocodiles. I had the doctor talking about babies. So the reports, of the dictator, his killing group is a special elite in the military. We used to call them the junglers. That's how they were identified. They used to steal babies from the hospital and sacrifice them into some sort of mystical undertakings. One can say voodoo or other stuff. But that is some of the things that we realized were happening in the Gambia. So it is the smallest country on the mainland. We got independence quite recently in 1965. And it was ruled by one man. We are unlucky because we've been having dictators or very bad, ineffective leaders for a long time. Since independence, we've had only 3 presidents. One man ruled the country for 30 years, then a dictator overthrew him and took over from 1994 to 2016. Now, this picture here, this guy is the dictator. When he took over, he was a young man, military guy, a young lieutenant. He started, populist movement, asking, journalists, you can criticize me, you can do whatever you want. This is a democracy. I'm gonna bring about freedom. But that was short-lived. He did not mean it. He wanted to control the country, and within a short time, he started calling journalists unpatriotic citizens, or actually insulting African journalists in general. They are, trying to refer to journalists as those working with imperialists. He was trying to appeal to the masses to think he is a patriot or a Pan-Africanist, which was not the truth. He was just trying to consolidate himself. Then he accused journalists of trying to sell the country to enemies. And these are his own words. He said, journalists are the illegitimate sons and daughters of Africa. This created a lot of hate against journalists, the public, and then everybody started to hate journalists. People would be beating up journalists in the streets. Sometimes people will even illegally attack and hurt journalists in the streets because of what he was saying. He gave people the license to do so. What was specifically dangerous about this regime is that he created specific groups within the army. Some are called junglers, some chiakas, different groups that would torture, abduct, and kill people. But even within his ruling party, he created small groups. Sometimes we call them the Green Boys, the July 22nd movement. Those were also walking around, attacking people at night, kidnapping people, making people disappear, and torturing them. Especially journalists, opposition participants, or activists. So by 2013, according to a study by the Doha Center, there were 250 exiled journalists from the Gambia across the world. This number may look small, but per capita for a population of less than 2 million, that is an extraordinary number. Literally, almost every journalist was gone. So then eventually the people occupying journalist jobs were people who either had to be silent, completely silent, or promote the interest of the dictatorship. And that way, everybody in the country was consuming propaganda and fear. And then in 2004, a leading journalist was shot and killed by the junglers, the president's bodyguards. This is the closest special forces that he created just to protect him. And this guy was a critic of the media. All of us, somebody like me, he inspired me, and I went through a lot of trainings under him. And that was the starting point of really inflicting fear in the population, because people started to see, well, if he can kill this guy, then no one is spared. And a young man, Omar Bah, well, similar names, but no relations. Young man, I knew him. He used to work at the radio, very articulate, critical to the regime. They shot him in broad daylight, and the military shot him. He was just covering an event, and they targeted and shot him. So it became like a wild goose chase against journalists and activists in that country. It was one of the most fearful moments in the history of this country. Then this guy, Ibrahim Mane, this guy was a best friend of mine. I knew him personally. We used to work in the same newspaper at the Daily Observer, which was the biggest paper in the country. I left the Gambia in 2006. 1 month after I left the country, he was arrested by the NIA. In the Gambia, there was this group that the president established called the NIA, which stands for National Intelligence Agency. They were not doing any intelligence work. That was literally like the arm of the secret police that were doing arrest and kidnapping for the president. It was just an attack force against the population. Everybody feared them, and they did not wear uniforms. They would just come and merge with the population. Sometimes it could even be a family member. So people feared, husbands feared wives feared husbands, people feared children. Everybody would be reporting each other. It was a society that was completely dismantled because of this situation. So this guy was arrested because somebody thought he was a threat to the government. He did not do anything. I know him personally. We've gone on coverages together. He's even slept over in my own apartment several times. We are best friends. He's disappeared for 15 years, arrested by the government official in broad daylight. Everybody saw him being arrested, but until today, he has not been released, and the reports are that he's dead. This is the body of a journalist, Musa Sedikan, who was tortured by the NIA, the National Intelligence Agency. So what happens is that sometimes the NIA will arrest you, and even the junglers will come in from the state house and torture people. It was just like a jungle justice in the Gambia. Again, he was the editor of a newspaper in the Gambia. He was also the vice president of the Gambia Press Union. Actually, at the same time, I was the Secretary General of the Gambia Press Union. He was the vice president, and he was arrested. So you can see how I was close to danger most of the times. This is his body. I'm sorry to show these pictures, but just to highlight the seriousness. These are not stories. This is exactly the body of my friend. I saw it myself. He removed his shirt to show me, because I was showing him my torture marks when I was tortured at the military barracks. Then he opened his eyes and his shirt and showed me, and I realized this is extremely serious. He could have died. So there was a pattern of intimidation, not only by arresting and torturing or threatening journalists, but closing media houses, or burning them down. The Independent newspaper, for instance, I worked there for 2 years during my career. That's the first newspaper I worked. This newspaper here, the president and he sent his guards to burn it down on 2 different occasions. The same thing with Radio 1 FM. So Citizens FM and Citizens newspaper was shut down. The Independent newspaper was shut down in 2006. In 2012, the Standard newspaper, the Daily newspaper, and Teranga FM radio were all shut down. And when I say shut down, I mean illegally. There's no court order. There was nothing. The president was the all-knowing and all-powerful. He would just go in and shut them down, send soldiers or military police to shut things down and guard the place. And I'm putting emphasis on what was happening against the press is because when you muscle the press, that is how you control the population, because the rest is all propaganda and inflicting fear. So then what he did was he started to legitimize some of the actions so that they can use that to imprison journalists or to put heavy fines on them. In 1999, for instance, there was this National Media Commission bill that was enacted by the National Assembly. And the National Assembly is like the parliament or the Congress of the country. It was fully controlled by the president's party because elections were never fair in that country. So they controlled, and so that means anything the president wanted would be passed. They dare not reject his ideas because even the lawmakers would be arrested and tortured themselves or killed. So they would do exactly what he wanted. So, this media bill required all journalists and media houses to register with the government on an annual basis. And also the commission had powers to fine custodial sentences to journalists that violated. And, this could be subjective because everybody at the commission would have been selected by the president so that they would do his bidding for him. So, then he did not stop there. In 2004, he amended the Newspaper Act, which means in order to register a newspaper, you would now pay $16,000 from $3,000. It used to be $3,000, then he increased it. And this also introduced the registration of broadcasting stations, meaning even anything, whatever you do that had broadcasting, you had to register it, and then the president had the power to stop it. So he used that to prevent people from registering anything that had to do with media, so that it's only propaganda institutions that were registered. Then came the Criminal Code Amendment Act 2005. This expanded the definition of libel and defamation by creating the offenses of false publication. False publication is subjective, but whatever the president wanted to be seen as false publication, prosecutors use that to arrest and prosecute people and imprison them. So it created all these new charges like false publication, sedition, and giving false information to a public official. So you'll see, even when you write a letter to a government official and complain about something happening to you, they will charge you for giving false information to a public servant. So everybody was afraid to talk, everybody was afraid to complain. So that means public servants, wherever you work, even private officials, you cannot say anything, even if you were being abused. Let's say, for instance, if a boss was sexually harassing their employee, you cannot complain it anywhere because they'll charge you for giving false information to a public servant because the boss is powerful. So that is exactly the environment it created. It imposed a minimum fine of 1,600 and maximum fine of 8,000, or an imprisonment for a minimum term of 1 year. So a minimum term of 1 year could mean 100 years, because it's just that it cannot be less than 1 year. So this is how systematically the president started creating, completely dismantling the civic engagement of the country. Then he created, at some point, a lot of journalists were in exile. Over 200 journalists, almost 300 Gambian journalists were in exile. So we started blogs, using social media, WhatsApp, online websites to reach out to the local population, especially some of us who were out of the country. He couldn't do anything to us. Sometimes he would torture our family members, but the fact that we were out, we had the freedom to speak. Not everybody, but some of us did. Then he created new laws to target that. And then he created like 100,000 fine or 15-year imprisonments against false news or publication against the government or public officials on the internet, meaning, using Facebook, blogs, or Twitter. And then he also banned the use of, let's say, WhatsApp or Viber. That time, Viber was very active before we had WhatsApp. So Viber and Skype were the most things we were using. And then WhatsApp came later. But he used this law to target people and prosecute them for even communicating through these means. Then when in 2016, the dictator lost an election. He went to an election and he lost. He refused. It was just so dramatic. He was shocked. He did not expect to lose an election. He considered defeat. 1 week later, he announced that he was changing his mind. He said, "I changed my mind." He decided to stay. He said he did not accept the defeat any longer. He was going to stay in power. So it was really a tough time. A lot of we galvanized. Personally, I went to Congress. I went to the senators in my state. I had a lot of friends here, the congressman, the friends in Washington, everybody across the world. The UN came to supported our efforts to make sure that this time he leaves. Then the UN supported a resolution to support the West African bloc, economic bloc. Mostly it was not all of them that participated because some of the countries supported the dictator. But Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria generally came together and formed an army, about 7,000 soldiers, and flushed the dictator out. So he was eventually, after 2 months of impasse and almost 100,000 Gambian refugees leaving the country, people getting hungry and sick. It was a humanitarian catastrophe. And during that period, he was arresting and torturing, trying to ensure he stays in power. There were refugee camps all over the border from Gambians fleeing the conflict. But this West African army came and kicked him out. He went to exile in Equatorial Guinea. So after that, the new government, it is a very, very weak government. It was a coalition government made of different opposition parties. They did not plan well. They did not have a plan. That they didn't even expect they would win. So the new president was not experienced. He didn't know what to do. He's not experienced. So he's very ineffective. He's literally just occupying the space. So there's a lot of lawlessness now, not coming from the government's perspective, but from the public. There's a lot of burglary and attacks and armed robbery. There's extreme breakdown of society. You can easily call it a situation like Libya or Somalia, or probably currently Afghanistan. That's what is happening in Gambia right now. No control, no law and order. So the rule of law is not being observed. But one thing the government did with the support of the UN funding agencies, they started what was called the Truth, Reparations and Reconciliation Commission. And this commission started hearings in 2018, about 3 years. Hearing, they had hundreds of testimonies of people who were either tortured or victimized by the dictatorship, or people who perpetrated, people directly who were members of the NIA, National Intelligence Agency, or members of the junglers, or just government officials who participated, came to confess of what was happening. Then, the revelation saw that there was a systemic killing of over 300 people by the dictator, and some of them fed to crocodiles. People who did that confessed. Crocodiles, the dictator had ponds. He had different palaces where he had crocodile ponds. He fed people to eat. He had mass graves that were exhumed. The perpetrators took people there to remove them. Then there were more than 100 individuals tortured. Thousands of Gambians were exiled during this period. It was a difficult time to listen to, but it was important for people to know the truth. So just quickly, my own story. I'm one of these people. All these statistics I'm talking about, I'm one of them. I was tortured in 2001 as a young reporter trying to cover a military trial, arrested and tortured. I still have marks from that torture that I went through. I was beaten and hit, and soldiers used bayonets to stab my body. There was blood all over. I was detained but later released, and no hospital would treat me. But to cut a long story short, in 2006, I was investigating and reporting a lot for online media that the dictator could not control on a website based in the US. And when they found out, they hacked the website and found out, then the dictator declared me wanted. This is the headline when I was declared a wanted man in that country. I was lucky to have already had the information and already left the country, went to Senegal. And when I was in Senegal, the president was still announcing that I'm a wanted person. Then it was very scary. My father was arrested. My older brother was arrested. My wife was in serious problem. She was living with some people in the city at some point. It was literally like her movement were curtailed for the next 2 years. It was just a very painful and scary time. I was very, very traumatized. So a group of human rights agencies took me to Ghana. And in Ghana, as I said, I was very frustrated. People not only ignorant about what was happening in the Gambia, but not even knowing the Gambia. Many people, not all, but many of them did not have an idea what the Gambia was. So then I started to realize we were in deep problem. If people within Africa don't know the country, how would they know what the problems were? So I was in pain. I look forward to never ever returning to the Gambia. So you see that sense of home started even to be very conflating. What is home? Where is going to be my home? But luckily, the United States government saw my problem and resettled me to the United States in 2007 as a refugee. I had refugee status, and 5 years later, I was able to establish and resettle as and become an American citizen. So quickly, when I came, I thought to myself, where is home? What is home? And what do I want? And do I succumb to the intentions of the dictator just to be quiet, or should I continue to speak out? Should I care about people in other nations or people who are going through other things? I needed basic things, the basic needs like the Maslow hierarchy, the security, sense of security, and food and water. Or that's all I needed. But now, what else did I have? Psychological needs. It was a period of high level of trauma. Then I started to study psychology. But my hope was, what do I do beyond that? Then I established in 2015 the Refugee Dream Center. That was after several years of being an advocate around refugee resettlement, refugee issues. There's high level of trauma, mental health issues, people needing to the support just to be empowered to integrate into American society, but also so you care about what is happening in their various countries of origin. So I decided within this setting in the United States, we'll be doing case management, which is really helping people from every aspect. We employ people from almost every ethnic population in this that are living in our city here in Providence. We have people from the Middle East, people from Caribbean, from Africa, everywhere, Southeast Asia, working with us on our board or staff to help, whether it's language related or anything else, to help people integrate into American society. And we do adult education that involves financial literacy, ESL, workforce development, and cultural awareness. And health promotion involves education about basic health issues or understanding of American healthcare system, mental health, domestic violence, and just psychosocial education. Then we have community organizing. We have a grant of where we have 8 community members from different ethnic communities working together to help us do community organizing, advocacy, interpreting, really almost everything, so that the community is together, because all of us have unique experiences. I've gone through different problems, different challenges. I like the Peace Islands Institute's approach, because that's exactly what you guys are doing, bringing people from different perspectives, different sense of experiences, and working together to ensure that we solve global problems that may be unique to each individual, but are common challenges. Then we have a youth mentorship that helps youth get out of trouble, have sense of self-esteem, but also to become productive members of society. And tutoring, which is matching Americans and refugees to work together so that they can help. Actually, this guy came on the right with the glasses, came to the United States when he was 5 years old, as a survivor of the Holocaust, and the other guy is a Syrian refugee who recently came in here, working together. It's really a phenomenal experience for both of them. And cultural engagement, just making sure people come together and learn about each other and work together to uplift one another. So just my thought as a survivor, I stopped calling myself a victim at some point. I said, as a survivor, what do? I wanted knowledge and skills. So I went to school. That's how I got a doctorate in psychology, because I wanted to understand trauma. I wanted to understand human behavior, and just to be able to help fellow refugees, or but humanity in general. And then I also wanted to serve humanity, sense of altruism, so that I'll just not stop, because I know even if I cannot be physically in the Gambia, I can do something for Gambians here. I can do something for people coming from the Middle East and Africa, from Eastern Europe, everywhere, coming here, working together. I wanted that sense of post-traumatic growth. Do I just get stuck in self-indulged sympathy to just keep being stuck in one state, or I want to move on? So I needed sense of post-traumatic growth. But again, most importantly was a sense of voice. Do I let the dictator take my voice from me, or do I just come back and have a voice? I wanted to prove a point that I cannot be silenced. I wanted to be there to speak out and tell the world my story. And that is how I wrote the book, Africa's Hell on Earth, The Ordeal of an African Journalist. And Africa's Hell on Earth It is exactly the words of the dictator in the Gambia. He said to journalists, if you write anything about me, I will take you to Africa's hell on earth, which in reference to his most heinous prison. That is Mile 2 prisons is outside the city, the capital city, Banjul, but it's many people go there and die because it is a very difficult place to survive. So he calls it Africa's hell on earth, and that is what inspired the name of the book. So I just wanted to once again thank the doctor for a beautiful presentation, because I think you gave the prelude for what I could do to give a perspective of another country, especially the Gambia. Thank you so much, everyone, and I look forward to having further conversations with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Bah. I am extremely educated with everything that you have said. Not only you and everything, this show really has an eye-opening for me, and as well as the educated background. However, I do have a couple questions, and it's gonna be quick because time is running. This question goes for both of you. What else can be done to spread awareness of this difficult situation? People are in torture. People are in doing a lot of things in the community. So how can we spread this word out to help others? Dr. Bulent, you first.
Yeah, we are journalists. We are just carrying messages and spreading messages, the message of people, the message of oppressed people, especially the underprivileged people. So we have to go on spreading this message of persecuted people and masses, both in Africa and in Turkey, and maybe in the United States of America. We know how the blacks have some discriminations they suffered in the US. So wherever the oppressions occur, I think the all people who respects the people as being a human should raise their voice. So this organization, maybe the so humble organization, I don't know, maybe so limited numbers of people watch us, but this is an effort to raise our voice and convey our message, convey the message of voiceless people, especially in Turkey, in Gambia, maybe in the Syria, in China. The all people should help each other and show solidarity to raise this common voice against oppressions of all kinds. Otherwise, I don't know. We have no power to mobilize United Nations Security Council or European commissions. We are trying everything, but sometimes the real politics prevails over the agonies of people, unfortunately.
And I want to echo or buttress that point, because I think sometimes it's difficult for a journalist to not conflate between your role as a journalist but also your role as an activist. I think every journalist, one way or the other, if you really worth your salt, you cannot be not an activist. You have to talk about issues. You have to uplift others. You have to give a voice to others. And doesn't matter who is offended or who it affects. Of course, you have to also be careful of not being biased, because it can create an opportunity for the other side to use that against you. But there must be a stance in the presence of brutality, people being killed, people being tortured, people suffering. There cannot be neutrality there. There must be a stance against that. And journalism would be one effective way to highlight this. And I think that is why every dictator or every tyrant who is committing heinous crimes mostly targets the media, because they know what can happen. And we see that almost everywhere. So it is a matter of doing the right thing. It's beyond just solidarity. It does not make sense for anybody to ignore what is happening in Turkey. When Dr. Bulent was talking, I was like shocked. I felt a certain sense of guilt. I follow what is happening there. I know of Erdogan. I know what is going on and the Gulen Movement, but I did not know the extent of the seriousness of what was going on. This is not supposed to. This is not how we're going to solve the problem there. And the people from Turkey alone cannot solve it. The entire world must participate, because you cannot take an entire population, a group of people, and destroy them, and then the world will react later. And the world is used to doing that. Again, going back to your examples, Dr. Bulent, of Darfur and South Sudan, the world waits when there's genocide, then they react. So I think we should act before it's extremely too late. I think it's almost too late in Turkey.
Once again, thank you, gentlemen. Dr. Bulent, I have a question for you that's coming from one of person in the audience. It says, what in perspective transpired between Gulen and his former friend, quote unquote, now sworn enemy Erdogan? I was in Turkey in the wake of the infamous July 2016 coup attempt. I gathered that i.e. Erdogan and Gulen, were two visionaries who had something in common to move Turkey forward. What is your take on this?
Yeah, it's a long story actually, but I try to keep it short. Yes, in the past, Erdogan come from a political Islamist background. We know that he's from National View ideology, and National View ideology is a kind of political Islamist or radical Islamist kind of. But in 2001, he established a new party by saying that we give up our old ideology and we now try to embrace all people. In the past, they polarized people. They said that we are Muslims, so we are all rights, and the other people is not accepted even as people. They don't respect the other ideology or the other lifestyles. In the past, the Gulen movement is not so close to Erdogan's line of political Islamism. But after Erdogan said that we give up the old ideology and we now try to democratize, reformize Turkey and make Turkey a European Union member. So it democratized Turkey and struggle against the military dominations over democratic institution in Turkey. So Gulen movement gives support for this democratization and reformation process. Until 2011, Erdogan continued for reforming Turkey, but in 2011 elections, he got 50% of the votes in elections. And until that time, also he could manage to control both judiciary and other bureaucratic institutions. And he created his own media, and he also created some kinds of so-called non-governmental organizations or civic organizations. So he thought that he accumulated enough power to not playing the game of democracy, and he returned back to his old factory settings of political Islamism and radical Islamism. And at the same time, the Arab uprisings gave a new motivation for Erdogan to follow a kind of imperial policies in Middle East and North Africa. The Gulen movement gave support for Erdogan to democratize and make more civilian administration in Turkey and make Turkey a respected member of a global community and a respected member of the European Union. But after realizing that Erdogan changed the mind and his route and his goals, so Gulen movement started to criticize the government. And since the conservative segments of Turkey, it consists of maybe over 70% of the population. If the media civil society organizations, and the masses sympathetic to Gulen Movement changed the attitude, it will be so effective on other masses, because they know that Gulen Movement gave support for reformation and democratization of Erdogan governments during almost 9 to 10 years, But now they start to criticize because of Erdogan changed the mentality and route and goals. So Erdogan targeted Gulen Movement to destroy it, to suppress its message and its effect over all the society. So whenever this question comes to the agenda, I said that the Gulen Movement didn't change. It keeps its stance for reformation and democracy and the human rights and promoting the rule of law and supremacy of law, and try to make the Turkey a respected part of global community. But Erdogan changed his mentality again, and returned back to his factor settings. I mean, the radical Islamist ideology. So after 2011, the Western countries who also gave support for Erdogan's first 2 terms of reformation realized that Erdogan now followed Islamist, neo-Ottomanist policy both in Turkey and around the country. So the change stems from Erdogan's attitude, not the Gulen Movement, and not as a journalist, not me. I gave support for reforms until 2010, but then I realized that numbers of mistakes he did, and after I realized that he changed his mentality and returned back to his radical Islamist program and goals again, I started to criticize, and I became one of the first journalists targeted by Erdogan in early 2010s. It is not my problem. I am a journalist and I am for democracy, human rights, supremacy of law, and whatever good for the nation. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Once again, I just wanted to say thank you for this time, for well answered questions, and for explaining everything about the situation, the things that you are doing. You taking your own experience to help other people out there. So thank you very much for that. And I also like to thank the Peace Island Institute for giving me this opportunity to moderate this show. I am very excited and very appreciating of this time. And thank you, gentlemen, for being so well educated by educative people by what's going on around. Once again, we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther, for your good moderation.
Great. Thank you so much, Esther. Thanks, Dr. Bulent. My appreciation.
Thanks. Nice to meet you also.
Yeah, thanks.
I hope to see you again.
Absolutely great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.